Great. Okay. Well, welcome back to those of you who are with us for our virtual General Assembly this morning. And we're into webinar mode this afternoon. We're looking into this afternoon at 3 case studies from across Europe about how to evaluate and review our collections. Our collections represent a huge source of engagement and knowledge. We collect for posterity, but I think there's an obligation to do more than that and to use them positively today as well. But we can't keep everything, much as some of us would like to, and much as some of our predecessors appeared to. So many of us have inherited enormous warehouses full of poorly documented material, or material collected for a kind of model of museum that's now in the past. So on what rational basis can we make decisions about whether to retain or dispose of our collections? So we have 3 leading IATM museums who are going to give us an insight into how they go about answering those questions. Kimmo Antila from the Finnish Postal Museum, Frank Gnegel at the Communication Museum in Frankfurt, and Peter Paul de Winter from the Dutch Railway Museum, all presenting case studies about re-evaluation, acquisition, and the coffee's just arrived, thank you, and disposal. So without further ado, let's ask Kimmo to share his screen and introduce the case study from Tampere.
Dear colleagues, I suppose my presentation is on and everything is all right. So my name is Kimmo Antila, coming from Tampere, Finland, 175 kilometers north from Helsinki. Some of us call it the museum capital of Finland. And I have a pleasure also of inviting my colleague from the Tampere City Museum, Stina Paavola, to present a case study of a very problematic issue of selling the motor vehicles from the collections. But let me start with a quick short introduction to our museum and these themes. And I'm really trying to focus on the cooperation on these difficult decisions, what we are forced to do with the accession processes, and also cooperation in collection of museum objects. I'm also currently a chairman of the Finnish Network for the Traffic and Communication Museum, and I mean that's also a fairly important network for all the communication and traffic museums here in Finland. We are cooperating a lot on this level, but also in other kinds of networks. And I think the most important network, which was founded already 2009, was the National Network for Collection Management, Cooperation and Contemporary Collection. A long name, we call it in Finnish only this kind of a TACO, short abbreviation of the Finnish names. So it is important to cooperate on national level, but also on local level. And we have a kind of a peculiar system here within our museum. We moved from Helsinki to Tampere. And as a national museum, it's quite rare to do this kind of big operations. But we found a new home under the roof of Vapriikki Museum Center with our exhibitions. Vapriikki, the factory, is one of the biggest and the most popular museums in Finland. And it's also housing some other private museums in addition to these city museum activities. And currently we are developing our activities towards the kind of a new national communication museum together with the operations from Tampere City Museums, like the Finnish Museum of Games and the Vapriikki Media Museum. We are also cooperating when it comes to the collections, and I think it is fairly important to emphasize the importance of this work together. That gives us also kind of a perspective how to evaluate our collections. We know that especially transport and traffic museums, we have huge collections and large objects which are sometimes very problematic. We found some solutions for this in our collections. I'm not going to go very deep into these issues today, but just to mention what we've done during last 5 years with our collections. We decided to donate some of the railway cars to the Finnish Railway Museum and the Locomotive Museum in Toijala, and nevertheless, we are still able to work with these collections. Nevertheless, they are not in our possession anymore. And I think that's the strength of a network. That's the strength of doing collection work together. What is also essential for us that we decided to build up a new storage facilities for our collections. We did it also with the cooperation with Finnish Labour Museum, a nationwide museum of social history here, located also here in Tampere. And when we were planning this new storage facilities, we decided not to take our car collection in, because we also have a nationwide national automobile and road museum, only some 25 kilometers away from Tampere. So it was fairly important for us also to create this kind of a new kind of a strong relationship with Mobilia National Road Museum, and we are hiring the space. We are also conserving the cars together. So that gives us synergy in our collection work. Of course, we still have to deal with the existing processes. The depots are filling up and the space is limited. I'd just like to mention a couple of approaches and perspectives before I give a floor to Tiina Paavola, because Tiina Paavola, head of collection center here in Tampere, was taking part and was a crucial member of this group, writing this kind of an investigation of how the de-annexation processes and practices should be developed in Finland. And it was published 2016. And I will also send you a link via chat. You can find this excellent publication. I still think it's one of the best de-annexation reports what I've read. Of course, there is a deep background on the ICOM Code of Ethics. There is also a background of this UK disposal policies that we've been benchmarking when this process was taken care of. But there are some excellent viewpoints of and ideas how to proceed with your de-annexation practice. Tiina will deal with part of them in her presentation just briefly. I already mentioned this national network of collection management and cooperation. It started actually focusing on contemporary documentation and contemporary collecting, but there is a huge development and huge importance of this network of really activating this kind of a new kind of a discussion and the share of sharing the burden of collecting between the Finnish museums, and kind of a fresh new perspectives how to collect, how to make de-annexations of the processes. I will also send you some of the links to the English web pages of this network. You can investigate what we have done here in Finland, and currently there are almost like 100 museums working together in this network, and we are working with this so-called pools, which are focusing on different kind of aspects, and we have a special pool for traffic museum as well. We all know the problems of the repatriation processes and decolonization processes, which are not really close to the traffic and communication museums, but of course we have to deal with them as well. And I already actually mentioned that we have done relocations of the museums, not due to these reasons which are quite obvious when we're talking about indigenous people, like here in Finland, the Sami people is quite topical issue at the moment in discussion, and the Finnish National Museum just opened up a new exhibition, which is going to be the last exhibitions which are going to show these objects here in southern Finland, and they are returning back to the north to the Sami National Museum, which is going to be opened, completely renovated next year. So I think I would just like to emphasize still the meaning of the cooperation in these processes. We have to have processes and practices, good practices on national level. We are able to do and develop these processes on local level. And I think that will give us new possibilities also to evaluate our collections from a new angles, new perspectives. And now I will give a floor and start a video presentation from this collection center of Tampere with head of collection center, Mrs. Tiina Paavola. And Tiina is also around and willing and able to answer your questions. And I will also like to thank head of collections Teemu Ahola for with the help of me to prepare this short introductory presentation. So I will just thank you for your interest, and now it's time to give floor to Tiina Paavola.
Thanks, Kimmo. Over to you, Emma.
Hello, dear colleagues and participants of the conference. My name is Tiina Paavola, and I'm working as a head of collection center in Tampere Museum in Tampere. And today I'm going to tell you about the problems and good practices of selling motor vehicles from our museum collections. And right now we are in the collection center in Ishard, in the biggest storage halls we have here. And as you see, we have a big collection, vast collections. We have almost 400,000 objects in our collections, and almost 80 motor vehicles. Only one of them is here, one car. 10 years ago, when we planned moving collections to the collection center, we faced big problems. We realized that we have 15 different storages full of artifacts, objects, and the conditions of the storages were not very good. We have problems also with collection management. We realized that we didn't know what we have, where we have, how much we have, and we realized that we need an active deaccession policy for our collections. So thanks to my colleagues who in 1990s developed a so-called evaluation by value method for the collections, we could categorize our collections into different categories. We separated the pearls of the collections, the educational collections, and then those items which we could remove. And we realized that we have about 10 cars, motorcycles and scooters, which were, we could say, a burden of our collections. We didn't need them anywhere. We could use them as spare parts or something like that. So what to do? We had different options. We could just throw them away to recycle or then sell them. Well, we haven't earlier sold anything from the collections, and we thought that would it be possible? There were museum ethical questions. Should we remove something from the museum collections? Should we sell something? And how could we do it? These vehicles were the property of Tampere city. So can we sell the property of Tampere city, and how should we do it? So we contacted a lawyer in Tampere, and he gave us advice. And he said that go for it. they are legal property of Tampere city, and if there is no museological obstacles, you can do it. But you have to be sure who is the real owner of these motorcycles and motor vehicles. And you have to make the selling process openly. These two conditions have to be sure. So it was the hardest part of the whole project. So how can we find out who is the real owner? When I read our diaries, our documentation, I realized that we have only the names and addresses of the donators. At the 1970s and 80s, when these motorcycles and vehicles came to the collections, we didn't wrote any donation book. We didn't have any documentation. So I contacted popular register authorities who helped me to find out whether these people are still alive. No, they weren't. And the authorities helped me to find out who were the heirs of these donators. So thanks to the internet, I found out their addresses, their phone numbers, and I contacted them and asked that if you like to have these cars back, they are yours. And of course, every one of them said that, oh no, do whatever you want, we don't want them back. And then I asked them to sign a donation book. So we owned these, after that we owned those vehicles. They were the property of Tampere city. Then the other conditions. We have to do the selling openly. So we published an advertisement, very short one, where we just said that we are selling project cars, and very short information about the cars, and then the name and address of our museum technicians. So we didn't tell in the advertisement who is the owner, that the museum is selling or anything like that. And we published the advertisement in a magazine which is dedicated for the vintage automobile enthusiast. Well, it was not very popular. We didn't get very many contacts, and so the citizens of the Tampere, they didn't react. Also, they understood that we are going to sell cars. Many people contacted and said that that's good. I have always wondered why on earth are you taking so much stuff to the collections? That's the good practice, that you sell something. And the revenue from the sales were not very high. We get only less than 2,000 euros each bunch of the motorcycles, one scooter and 5 cars. It was not much. But the advantage of the project were large, I think. We get a little sum of money, but of course they had been a burden for us for a long time, because all the storage spaces cost a lot. And so our conservators and museum technicians, they were very happy, because they didn't have to worry about these collections anymore. What are we going to do with these lousy cars which we couldn't use and which were not a part of the museum collection anymore? And if I take a disadvantage of this project, I can find only one. It was the fact that year after year, when we have after we have sold the cars, people keep on contacting the museum and asking the documentation. They have sold these cars again, and new owners will contact us and ask that, if you have the documentation, do you have the paper? I know that you are the previous owner. So the items will come back to us every time. So I think that if you want to get rid of the museum objects forever, you have to destroy it. If you sell it, it comes back to you. And we are looking for the day when someone will call us and ask that, would you like to take this back to your collections? Would you like to buy this? And we don't. I said that we have something 80 cars in our collections. They are really valuable pearls and so on. And only one of them is here in Collection Center. I will show it to you now. So let's move. As I told you earlier, we have approximately 80 cars in our collections, or actually cars, tractors, buses, ambulances, etc. And we have real pearls in our collections, and this is one of these. This is a Silent Northern from the year 1904, and this is something that we are not going to sell, definitely. Well, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Great. Well, thank you, Kimmo and Tina. That was great. I like the car at the end, particularly. We could have given that session the title of "What are we going to do with these lousy cars?" Which is a problem we've got in our cities as well. Let's, if you'd like to hang on to your questions, we're going to have a kind of questions and discussion as a separate session at 2:30 London time. So let's move now to Frank Gnegel in Communications Museum in Frankfurt. Over to you, Frank. Tell us about how you got rid of all that lousy material. You will have to unmute. That's it.
Sorry, due to some unsolvable technical problems for the moment, I would suggest that we change the that we hear the next
okay
session first. I had to admit that it just doesn't work for the moment, but I'm sure I can solve this soon.
Well, we have your video as a backup should we need it afterwards. Peter Paul, could you pick up the relay baton at this point and take us swiftly from Frankfurt to Utrecht, please?
Yes, of course, then. Thank you very much. We have prepared a little movie. Next to me is Lisanne Gille sitting. She is also in the movie, and we would like to show you the movie and tell our story, which is all captured in our movie. So if you can please start the movie.
Okay, thanks, Peter Paul. Over to you, Emma. Oh, that was the previous one. So was that.
Good afternoon, my name is Peter Paul de Winter. I'm the head of the collections of the Dutch Railroad Museum, established here in Utrecht in the Malibaan station. The museum was founded in 1927, so almost 100 years ago. And since 1954 we are established in this location, the Malibaan station, a former railroad station of the Dutch Railways. The beginning of our museum started as a private collection of G.W. van Vloten. Van Vloten worked at the beginning of the 20th century as a railway employee at the headquarters of the State Railways, Staatsspoorwegen in Utrecht, and started to collect all different kinds of objects that had something to do with the history of the railways. At that time, the collection mostly consisted of pictures, small objects and archival documents. The museum started with collecting small objects and small items of the Dutch railway history. Later on, bigger objects were added to the collection, steam locomotives like this. But unfortunately, the situation was not well equipped for keeping all this collection in good conditions. Therefore, the museum was redesigned between 2002 and 2005. There was a complete renovation of the Malibaan station, and the leading director of that time created with a team of specialized designers a new museum hall with 4 permanent experiences. For example, you can join a first-class journey of the Orient Express or visit an old mining village which leads you finally to the arrival of the first steam locomotive, the Arend. We have combined a new way of telling the story of the history of the railways in the Netherlands. We have created worlds and we pick a certain time area, in this situation the arrival of the Arend in 1839, in which we tell everything which is related to that area, as if you were going back into time with a time machine and arrived and you see everything is there, would have been there in that time. We have also another way of telling the stories, not a traditional museum with small text signs, but we are telling stories. We're using headsets or actors to tell you something, and our aim is of course that you learn something about the history of the railways in the Netherlands. The main target group of the museum are families with children. For the museum, historical awareness is an experience about history and heritage. But our museum is not only about public entertainment. Throughout the years, we have collected many different objects related to the railway history in the Netherlands. These objects are known and seen by a big group of enthusiastic railway heritage fans. We recognize the knowledge of these railway experts, and we are more than happy to learn from them and to share information with them, finally to get a better result of the collection registration in future.
Good afternoon everyone, my name is Gnegel. Since 2020 I work as a junior curator at Spoorwegmuseum, part of the collection department. Most of my time I'm doing research on the history and provenance of our collection, and I'm working on a collection documentation archive. Today I will tell you something about our latest developments in the collection department in relation to collection management and registration. Last couple of years there have been shifting perspective to the mission and vision of the museum. In the latest mission statement 2020-2030 of the Spoorwegmuseum, it was defined that in the next couple of years there will be a new tendency to focus on collection management. With this statement, the museum started on several questions such as how to define our core collection, what kind of heritage do we want to conserve, preserve, categorize and exhibit in our museum, what are the main arguments to add or keep an object as part of our collection, which objects are most valuable to us. In short, we had the main question, what is the core collection of our museum and which part of the collection can eventually be deaccessioned. To help us answer this question, we asked Dutch Cultural Heritage Agency, or Rijksdienst voor Cultureel Erfgoed in Dutch, to help us evaluating our collection. The Dutch Cultural Heritage Agency developed a 6-step system for assessing museum objects and collections. Firstly, we had to categorize all the different categories that are present in our museum. In total, we could define 88 collection categories, and our collection of approximately 130,000 objects could be placed in the following 6 main categories: rolling stock, infrastructure, railway operation, travelers, imagination and personnel. For each of these 88 categories we created a folder with a description defining, if possible, its precise content in quantities, materials, ensembles, etc. For a more comprehensive evaluation of a category, it was useful to gather as much background and information as possible. With these descriptions we could define a reference framework on a national level, comparing our collections to other museological collections in the Netherlands. After we decided the relevant criteria for the evaluation, we recorded each of the 88 collections categories on a evaluation form. This process took us circa 3 months, 9 hours a week, with a total of 45 sessions with our collection department. It was relevant to record these results on paper, since the precise meaning of value is difficult to be captured in just a few words. After these sessions, we wrote an analysis of all the categories, and we could define which part of our collection scored in high school or middle school. And we also defined several categories that possibly could be deaccessed in the nearby future. In this process, the arguments accompanying the evaluation are more important than counting scores on the paper. With this statement, the museum started on several questions such as What is the core collection of our museum? What kind of heritage do we want to conserve, preserve, and exhibit in our museum? What objects are most valuable to us, and how do we make the decision to add or keep something in the collection? As an answer to the beginning question, our core collection is historical and representative in relation to the railways in the Netherlands. It has a direct association with a particular person, group, event, place, or activity in the past of the railway history of the Netherlands. It's recognizable and iconic for the railway history of the Netherlands and essentially part of the passenger experience. So, what's next? Registration. Many objects must still be described, digitized, and registered. This effort does not only benefit our own collection management, but will help to communicate our collection to the outside world and connect with the broader public. The desired end result is that we will have a registered, digitized, cleaned up, and published online our core collection by the end of 2023. These new developments are also the basis of our future collection plan, acquisition strategy, and deaccessioning policy. With this goal in mind, the collection department is going through quite an expensive process that we have named the registration factory. Since our previous collection management system was outdated, a choice was made for a new future-proof registration system. After quite some research, we made the decision to work with Atlantis, designed by Devented. This system was particularly appealing to us since it offered great options for online disclosure, crowdsourcing, and linked open data. In addition, a physical registration factory was created, with workplaces, storage space for objects, packing materials, and photo studios. And right now, the first collection categories are being moved from the storage rooms to our registration factory. Before registration, the objects are filtered from duplicates, objects are checked on physical conditions, objects that do not fit our formulated core collection framework are selected to be deaccessioned, and after registration, digitization, and or photographed, the objects are moved back to a new place in the storage room. Upcoming months, we're testing and programming our new CMS system. We're looking for the possibilities to use a crowdsourced information platform and creating online disclosure. And we're hoping to share our newly registered collection with a broader audience online.
Great, thank you, Peter Paul. Well done, good video. Enjoyed that. It would be nice to be in Utrecht again, and it reminded me what a great museum Spoorweg Museum is. So thank you for that. Really enjoyed it. So there's some I think I have some questions there, but we'll keep those for the next session. Shall we try you again, Frank? How are you doing?
Yes, I'm fine. I was just a little bit surprised because I thought maybe Emma would start the video.
You can do if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best.
Okay, fine. So Emma, we're back to you. There you are, Frank.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm going to talk about mass deaccession of collections items and significance assessment and what we have done in Frankfurt on that during the last years. Those of you who have attended the 2019 IATM conference may know the first part of my lecture, but today I'm going to focus on what we have done since that time. The Museum Foundation of Post and Telecommunications is quite in a special situation. The foundation was established after the privatization of the Federal Mail in 1995, when the museums were converted into a foundation under public law. And the foundation became legal owner of all historical objects within the former Federal Mail, regardless of their location. Subsequently, a process of concentration among the existing postal museums started. There was an excess of them. And until 2005, the collections of 5 postal museums and about 20 other larger postal collections had to be dissolved. So during these 10 years, several 10,000 objects have to be moved and several thousand objects had to be disposed of. This was the situation in 1995, and as you can see, there were quite a large number of postal collections in Western Germany, whereas in the former German Democratic Republic, only one postal museum exists. And this is the situation in 2004. All objects were transferred either to Frankfurt or Berlin or the archive of Philately in Bonn. The problem with these newly inherited collections were that there weren't really museums collections. They were collected by postal staff without a collection plan, and they were driven by the idea of rescuing old technology. And they regarded an object as a replaceable example of a technical development or a design with no individual history. And there was no coordination between the museums and the collections, so most of them amassed exactly the same sort of mass-produced objects. And of course, there was no inventory, no records, no documentation, so that the provenance of the objects is largely unknown. Our major problems were the huge quantities. We had to move about 250,000 objects. There was always time pressure. The storage rooms were mostly not owned by the foundation, and they often had to be cleared at a short notice. There was a lack of human resources. The foundation was quite well staffed, but standard procedures would have required a much larger workforce. And there was no framework at that time. In Germany, de-accession guidelines didn't exist in 1995, so we have to find our own, well, pragmatic approach. Everything potentially valuable has to be transferred to Frankfurt or Berlin, and we tried to reduce the excess of objects to a reasonable quantity by disposing of historically worthless items on site. And most important thing, by any means, avoid any irreversible mistakes. So on site, doublets were disposed of, doublets with respective local collections, objects of which there were several copies in Frankfurt or Berlin, large object switching and transmission technology already present in our collection at least once. So we transferred all objects to Frankfurt or Berlin that we didn't have in our collection, all objects that we couldn't identify, objects with traces of use or a known provenance, and all objects we think they were possibly expensive or valuable, even if they were plentiful in stock. This means everything before 1920 or everything worth more than 200 euros. And of course, we transferred all objects which were probably better preserved than those already present in the collection. As a result, the overwhelming majority of objects was transferred, and approximately 25 of them were disposed of on site. These were almost exclusively objects built after 1945. But this was probably a mistake, because as a result, we have quite a large number of uncompleted tasks. The excess of objects continued to be a problem, and within our collection, not the unique specimen is standard, but the plentiful objects. Currently, about 15 to 30% of the objects can be justified by the collect plan, and in 2025 or in 2029, at the latest, the whole collection has to move to another location, because our present location is part of a housing project. So again, several thousand objects will have to be deaccessioned. In 2019, we made a pilot project with the telegraph collection. This is one of the oldest parts of the collection with an above average rate of historically and financially valuable objects. And we reappraised about 2,100 objects, and 310 of them, about 15%, were deaccessioned. All 300 objects were offered to the technical museums of the German Museums Association. They took 180 objects, 58%. They were transferred to other museums. 18 of the remaining objects were given to private collectors, which was, so we thought, a good idea for saving them. And 102 low-value objects were sold to a dealer. The rest of them. The lessons we have learned from that project is that the whole process took up too much time, more than 2 years for 2,100 objects. But what will happen when you have to deal with 20,000 objects, 40,000 or 60,000? One main problem is that the inventory and documentation of low-value objects, apparently of no interest to other museums, was too time-consuming. The communication with other museums was lengthy, very lengthy. For instance, when objects are offered for free, some museums or curators seem to stop thinking. Many museums were interested in objects which were simply not suitable for their collection. For instance, used telegraphs, which were used in large cities and very busy telegraph exchanges, many museums from the countryside were interested in them, but simply they were not in use on the countryside. So we felt that we needed a new deaccession policy, but for a new deaccession policy, we needed to have a new collection policy first. Of course, we had a collection policy, but this policy was about 15 years old and relatively short. To prepare for the future, we started to draw a new collection development policy first in 2020. Of course, it contains a collection statement of purpose, self-conception, and objectives. And a large part of it is a history of the quite complicated history of the different parts of the collections. But the most important part of it is the accession policy and procedural guidelines for accessioning objects, and the significance assessment criteria for accessioning and deaccessioning. This is what we felt is the most important part of it. And the next year, in 2021, we wrote a collection review. This means we wrote a detailed description of the 25 collections we have with their 124 sub-collections and 579 categories of objects. And for every sub-collection, we wrote a short history of this sub-collection. We mentioned the provenance of the objects, the previous collection objectives. We mentioned important objects and object groups. And of course, we draw themes and priorities for future collecting. And for every category of objects, we counted the number of objects, the number of objects in the database, the number of objects online, objects in the permanent exhibition. And of course, we decided whether there is a necessity for a collection review in the future, or whether it is a closed or an active collection. One of the results is a statistics, which was quite insightful, even for us. So now we found that we have more than 11 million objects, but only 58,000 of them are three-dimensional objects. The rest is philately, photograph collection, letters, postcards, telephone cards, money, maps, and the graphics collection. This was quite a surprise for us. And during the compilation of the new collection policy, we had some problems. One of the problems was that the achievements of museums outside of Germany on significance assessment were largely unknown in Germany and, of course, to us. We found no good examples for a collection policy from other museums. The existing collection policies are relatively short, and they tend to avoid real determinations on which object should be acquired or not, so they impose practically no restrictions on the curators. And unfortunately, we had some internal resistances among the curators. As you may know, curators tend to believe that they know what's best for their collection, so a detailed written policy poses restrictions on what is considered to be the autonomy of the curators. So some discussions arose on the question who ultimately makes decisions, and the hard criteria for significance are questioned. But as a result, we found solutions, and one of them is the handling of doublets of multiple copies, which is one of the largest problems for us. And we defined that the normal case is one object. For scientific purposes, one copy of an object or type is sufficient. And duplicates or further specimens are only required for the foundation's own permanent exhibitions. Of course, you always need, or you sometimes need more than one specimen. For instance, when one object is serving as a transmitter and the other one is serving as a receiver. And of course, we have 3 permanent exhibitions in Berlin, Frankfurt, and Nuremberg, and there are objects which are needed simultaneously in every permanent exhibition, the first telephone, for instance. But for all other objects, it is not sufficient to say, well, probably you may use this object in more than one permanent exhibition. There have to be comprehensive reasons to make that most likely to happen. And we decided that there's a maximum of 4 objects per type, so we keep no exemplars as a reserve in case of loss or damage, or for a possible bulk presentation of several copies in future exhibitions, or as an item for loan to other museums. The other outcome is the criteria for accession and deaccession. And these criteria are, of course, the identification, the importance and relevance, the source value, the representativeness, the innovative power, rarity, authenticity, associative power, the contribution to remembrance, didactic usability, exhibitability, the aesthetic perception, and what we call aura. Of course, every point of this list is underlined with several questions which had to be answered. Unfortunately, today we did not have enough time to present this in detail. These criteria are balanced against some practical collection issues, the short-term costs, the long-term costs, possible legal problems, the place for the storage, the workload for documentation, the condition of the object, possible risks. And we find that this method is quite suitable for the accession of objects, but to answer all questions in the process of deaccessioning is lengthy and too time-consuming when it comes to large number of objects. And so in the future, we have to find a solution for a significance assessment during the deaccession process. And this is what we will do during the next years. And I hope that I can present you the results in a future meeting. Thank you very much for your attention. Of course, I would like to recommend further reading, of course, our own collection policy, which can be found at the website of the Museumsstiftung. But the colleagues in Wales have written a quite interesting paper on a significance process, which can be found on their website. And of course, I would like to recommend the paper Assessing Museum Collections by the Rijksdienst for het Cultural Erfgoed in the Netherlands. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Frank. That worked like a dream. Really interesting to see the whole kind of rational process through from beginning to end. And I think it's interesting that this is clearly not something you got right first time. You have to keep revisiting these questions as time goes by. Well, we're nearly running out of time for this session. So what we're proposing to do is we're going to keep questions for our webinar speakers for 1 hour's time at 2:30 London time. And we're also going to, normally we would be now standing around in an interesting museum, having tea, cakes, and talking to each other about what we've just heard and what we've just seen. Obviously, that's not quite so easy to do today, but after you've had a cup of tea and a slice of cake or a biscuit, can I suggest you join us at 2:30, and we will both ask questions and have some discussion about some of the really interesting issues raised by those three presentations, and then we'll move and have some discussion about what we've learnt during the last 18 months. So I'm interested to hear from you about what you think, what you will hold on to from what you've done in the last 18 months during the pandemic, and what you will be getting rid of when you, I won't say go back to normal, because normal will not be normal anymore, but what the next phase for your organizations might be. So what have we learnt? I think it would be interesting to share some of those thoughts for half an hour or so after we've had a cup of tea. So you've now got an hour actually for tea and a biscuit, and I hope you'll 41 of you will join us again in an hour's time for the third part of the IATM virtual conference. But a big round of applause, virtual or otherwise, to our speakers for putting together those presentations for us, and of course doing it under difficult circumstances. And thank you particularly to my colleague Emma for fielding all the videos and producing it seamlessly for us. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you again in 1 hour's time. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome back. Good afternoon. Hope you've had a good cup of tea and a slice of cake. Normally at the conference, we would have been looking around the exhibits. We would have heard we've heard some great presentations, and this is the more sociable part of the conference. But we first of all have an opportunity for you to ask questions of our speakers from the webinar earlier on. I'm sure you've got lots of questions for 3 really excellent presentations. Frank has to go at 2:30, so I think it would be good if you have any questions for Frank in Frankfurt to perhaps start with those. So you can either use the chat function and I'll pick them up, or you can put your hand up and ask direct. I think we now have, I've got one screen full of people, so I can see your hands if you want to do that, or just jump in. Let me start the ball rolling, Frank. I was really interested in your comment about how the curators always think that they know best about the purpose of the museum and what they should collect and what they shouldn't, which was, I think, it's a perennial question, isn't it really? I guess I'm interested to know how the significance criteria were put together, and whether you use just internal resources or some external views of what you should be collecting. Was this an inside job, or was it did it involve talking to other outside bodies about what your museum should collect or not collect?
No, I must say there was an internal process, and we had no external advice. And when I look back, it would have been probably good to have some help, and maybe today I would love to introduce the colleagues from the Netherlands, from the Cultural Erfgoed, probably to help us also, well, to start with a meeting with all colleagues. And of course, this is a difficult process. This is a process, you know. We are on a way, and it is always a little bit difficult. De-accession is always difficult when it comes to the own collection. Of course, theoretically, all curators say, well, we have too much objects, we must de-accession something. But this always applies to the collections of the other curators. So it would be helpful to have a broader view on the own collection. I think this would be very helpful to have some of, well, people coming from outside and have a fresh view on what you have collected for decades.
Yeah, and certainly in the UK these days, some funders kind of expect you these days to have done a certain amount of co-curation, you know, with outside bodies and interested parties when dealing with, say, exhibition content. So it is I think it's becoming more the norm than it probably was even when you started out on this process a few years ago. We had one question in the chat for you, Frank, about whether the de-accessioning process extended to the philatelic collections as well.
Well, no. Basically, we, of course, there was the idea, but we never really had we never had a real discussion about this topic. of course, we knew that other philatelic collections, especially at the National Postal Museum in Washington, have done that. But for the moment, it is no option, because the main object for deaccessioning is curatorially driven, and in the end, the philatelic collection is huge, but you need not much space for it. So 5 cars, 3 lorries, this is the same space like all the philatelic collection. So deaccessioning philately is much work, and well, you probably get some funds out of it, but this is not the reason why we are doing that.
No, indeed. Thank you. Yeah, there's a question from Tina Pavola. Tina, you have your hand up. Oh, over to you.
Yes. Okay, thank you. A little bit technical problems. Well, I would like to first thank Frank Gnegel about your very insightful analysis about the deaccession process. You have really made a huge progress and work with your collections. And I think that the problems that you explained are very familiar with all of us who have big collections. But my question is that when you have that kind of, you use the methodology or criteria to deaccessions, do you have some kind of ready-made system for that, or have you invented it by yourself? And my second question is that do you have national legislation which allows and give support for the deaccessions? For instance, in Finland, we only last year get this kind of legislation. That's why I'm interested.
Well, we used our own system. We developed it by ourselves, and it's like a huge table where you make crosses in different at different places. The main problem is for us, we experimented with a sort of system where points are given. So at the end, you have a sum of points. This object has 250 points, but the problem is, what does this number, what is the outcome of this number? So what is a good object, for instance, an object in the permanent exhibition, or what is a bad object where everybody thinks that it shouldn't be part of our collection? So in fact, giving points and counting numbers is a huge workload and didn't really help us. So we are experimenting with a system where we are still experimenting and finding how to find a more objective solution. Yeah. And the other question was, well, in Germany, there are no legal restrictions on deaccessioning museum objects. It is sometimes different whether you are it depends on the body who govern the museum. So whether it's a museum owned by a city, a museum owned by the so-called states or the countries within Germany, or whether it is a museum run by the federal government. So mainly the restrictions are they arose from the question of they are fiscal. They are having to do with the money, probably. So you probably cannot give something away which has a monetary value. So this is the main problem. And it's always for us, it's not the problem dealing with high valuable objects or with objects which have no value, which are worthless. But for us, the main problem is the huge number of middle class objects, maybe worth 200 euros. So you can't throw them away, but nobody really wants to have them.
Yeah, as ever. Certainly in the UK, we disposed of 410 posters from our collection through Christie's, and we ran an auction. They were all surplus. We had at least 3 of each, but we are obliged to keep the proceeds from that in a separate fund, which can only be used to buy things for the collection or pay for conservation and restoration. So that's the ethical stance around the accessioning and particularly around sale in the UK. Yeah.
So this is something we included in our deaccessioning policy because it is normally the case in German law that the money which comes in goes into has to be used for the whole organization. You cannot have income which is dedicated to a special purpose, like buying new things for the collection. And this is something we have changed, that income generated from selling something from the collection can only be used for buying new objects. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Frank. May I say a little bit more? Oh, this is Tiina Paavola. Thank you for your comments. In Finland, we have that kind of situation that I think that might interest you, because last year we get our new museum law, and the old one was from the year 1993. And in this new museum law, it was said, or actually in the governmental bill of the law, it was said for the first time in the history that the deaccessions is an acceptable way of collection management of the museum if it is mentioned in their collection policy and the procedures are mentioned there. So I was quite amazed because this kind of sentence was there, because I think it opens the gates to the, for instance, for the privately owned museums to sell the collections if they want to. And we have a similar kind of system in publicly owned museums, that it's a question about the monetary value that you have to take care of. But if we think that we have many foundation-based art museums, etc., and now when it is said in the museum law that it's totally acceptable to dispose or sell or anything like that, when you have mentioned it in your collection policy, I think that it may cause problems. And of course, someone may say that we have ICOM museum ethical rules. Of course we have, but they are guidelines. Our legislation is stronger if someone really likes to use this. So I don't know if in the Finnish museums people have not noticed that in a large scale that we have this kind of writing in our law, but well, that's the way it is, and I don't know what it cause in the long run.
Yeah, that would be a worrying development, that you could, if you have a hole in the roof, you sell a car to mend the hole in the roof, which is not a good place to be for any museum.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Sure. Well, look, thank you, Tiina, for that. Any other questions for Frank before he dashes off? Okay, or for any of our other speakers, for Peter Paul, or for other speakers we had over lunchtime. Okay, well, look, thank you very much, Frank, for that contribution. I think it's really interesting to see, as you said, it's a journey that you're on, and that you've kind of gone round the circuit kind of once already, and are now doing it again, and thinking that through. And I think we all enjoyed the photograph of the dumpster full of kit that you were getting rid of. I think we've probably all got those hidden away somewhere, but it's nice to be able to do it in a rational and legal way. It was good to see that.
Yeah, this was the most important thing for us, because we didn't want it when we have to move out here from our present location in maybe 4 years. We will do those process in another way than we have done it, than we were forced to do it before.
Yeah. I guess it also underlines it's almost too obvious that it's true, but that we need to be really careful about what we do collect now. And I think we probably are all collecting in a more rational, orderly way than many of the collections that we inherited. But those of you who have visited the London Transport Museum depot at Acton, it's a great facility, and I remember promising the London Transport Board that it would last 100 years. 20 years later, it's full up, and we need to find some more space, or to be a bit more rational in our collecting.
Yeah, but I have one thing I've forgotten to tell the colleague from Finland. There is a difference between objects which were properly accessioned and objects which were simply there. They belong to us, but they are not properly accessioned. They are simply non-accessions. So there we have a more simpler procedure to deal with them, because we never, no curator or museum never said that, well, we want that this should be part of our collection. Somebody else collected it and it's now here, but this is a difference from the objects we have properly accessioned.
No, you're right. And until quite recently, we would find that a lorry would arrive at the store where for an underground contractor who had been working, overnight on replacing some signals or replacing some track or whatever, and it would just arrive, and they assumed we would just take it. And some of my some curators in the recent past just did take all of that, and so we're left with pallets of material that we don't actually need to access at all. What we do find is that it's possible to collect non-collection items for direct sale. So we have a line in our shop called decommissioned originals. So there's seats from underground trains that have been scrapped. There's lighting. There's push buttons from the doors. There's the luggage racks from rolling stock that's been scrapped recently, which is really quite and signage, particularly signage, very profitable line for us. So we have an arrangement with Transport for London that nothing is disposed of unless we said yes, we don't want it. So there's an interesting transaction of kind of lower level items that we collect as shop stock rather than collections stock. Yeah. So there's a question, Peter Paul, you and your colleague.
Yes, Sam. My colleague Lisanne wants to add something to the discussion. So, Lisanne.
I'm very familiar with what you guys said, because Frank, I recognize completely that you have so much in your museum which is not legally obtained, or it comes in the museum and it's there, suddenly it's there. So what we use is our reference framework, which we designed with the Rijksdienst. We use it when we get a donation. So with that reference framework, we decide, do we want to keep it? Is it part of core collection? Is it really something we want to keep? Because in the Netherlands, it's very strict to de-access. We have a law, it's called LAMO. It's sort of legislation for de-accessioning museum collections, I think it's translated. So every item we want to de-access, we have to make a registration. We have to put a picture online on a website, has to be there, and other museums have to decide if they want to take it over. Because in the Netherlands, a lot of the collection is considered as a sort of collection of the Netherlands. So it's sort of public domain, which sort of, well, it protects the heritage, makes it still public accessible. But in the Netherlands, it's very strict. So that's why documentation of our collection is so important when we want to keep it, but also when we want to de-access it. And when it's not there, I think after that process, it's the point of that we can sell it. But it takes a lot of legal steps in the Netherlands.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And it's probably a good thing that that is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, but I sometimes think that well, this is sometimes something I learned during this process. Sometimes I think colleagues or other museums should be protected from the objects we de-accessioned. I don't think that it is always true that objects we de-accessioned should be kept in other museums, because we always have enough. So if they would ever need one of these kind of telephones, they could borrow it from us, and we will happy to give it for them as a permanent loan. But is it necessary that every museum or many museums in Germany collect, for instance, some telegraph apparatus, some telegraph equipment, or something like that, or if it is really necessary, if even if we share some objects with bigger museums like the Deutsche Museum in Munich or the Techmuseum in Mannheim, I'm not sure if it is really a good. I'm not sure if it is really necessary that other museums need to keep things we de-accessioned, because for the society as a whole, probably there is a number of objects which are needed in further exhibitions of all German museums. So
yeah, you keep it. I understand what you mean, because there's just a lot of stuff. So there are a lot of the same telephones, and you can share. I agree, but I think it's sort of safeguarding the heritage of the Netherlands, that it doesn't flow into private collections of some sorts, which is not visible anymore for the public space. So that's sort of yeah, sort of the silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, but you are well, it's some of an export of your problems to other museums.
They can agree. It's also part of the law that none of the museums have to take it.
Yeah,
so
of
none
course.
of them want it, then there are still registrations, but yeah, you can do sort of you can take different routines, you know.
Well, as I said in my presentation, I sometimes did not really know what those museums taking things from us will do with that.
Yeah.
Can't imagine.
I guess some of us want to need something for an exhibition or for a handling collection that can be used to destruction, and I think that's why I think you come back to the point that if you have really good process for policy and process for what you do collect, it's possible then to have ancillary material that you can use to destruction. So you can give it to children to handle or to play with, or it goes in a box that goes to schools, or there's a sort of secondary collection, which is sometimes an easier destination, less bound by ethical process, I think, too. Yeah. So anything else for Frank? Thank you, Frank. That was great to have your presentation today, and see you again in the future. See you in Prague, I hope.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye bye. Are there any other questions for presentations this morning, or shall we just move on to the final piece this afternoon? I thought it might be interesting, as we would be doing in the bar normally, to be discussing how the hell we've managed in the last 18 months, and what have we learnt, and what will you carry into the next 18 months or longer. And I'm happy to set the ball rolling on this, because I think there are probably three things that we learnt at London Transport Museum. One was that when we were locked down, it was really important to use that time to try new things and to innovate, and to innovate quite fast. So we rapidly took the mantra that perfection was the enemy of the good, and that we should just do good, and that we should do it quickly. We should do it in an innovative way. We should be prepared to fail fast, move on, and try something else. And I think it made a big difference to our morale and our presence, particularly in the digital sphere, that we were just doing something. It didn't really matter that whether it didn't have to be fantastically polished, high quality material, but it was just important to do something. And we've learned quite a lot from that, I think, about being agile and about being innovative. So that was one of my lessons. Would anyone else like to pitch in what they're going to hang on to from the last 18 months? I see no hands. Okay, my second point. When we reopened, we found that the family audience came with, particularly audience with children who are very important to London Transport Museum, came back really quickly, and came back in far bigger numbers than we had anticipated. So the fact that we worked really hard on that audience in providing something for them in the exhibits and in holiday programming and so forth, it really paid dividends when we reopened. So we've done, since May, we have 72% of our 2019 numbers for the same days in that year, which was much higher, much higher than we had budgeted for and expected, which was good to see. And I think I was very struck. I went to the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square 2 months ago, and it was nearly empty, because it's so dependent on international visitors and blockbuster exhibitions. And when they didn't have that audience, they appeared to not know what to do, which slightly surprised me. And when I went to the National Gallery, there were more security guards than visitors. And yet back at my museum in Covent Garden, it was really busy that day in August. So I think the lesson we took was that investment in family audience was really was part of our DNA. It was really a really good investment, and we saw that come back very quickly. So I don't know whether that echoes with some of you as well. I guess my third point would be that the people we work with have generally proved to be utterly amazing during the last 18 months. The way that they've been able to work from home in an agile, creative, sort of energetic way in at times really dire circumstances when we didn't know, where the epidemic was going and whether our organization would survive it or not, has been incredibly important. So some of the investment that we put into developing our teams and developing their creativity and their ability to work unsupported was suddenly became very important in April, May, June 2020. So the culture of the organization, the staff culture of the organization, was really a deep well which we were able to draw from. So those are probably my three amongst a number. Chris Smythe, you've got your hand up. It's your race.
Yeah, indeed. Can you hear me, Sam?
Yes, I've got you.
Good, thank you. Yes, speaking on behalf of the Worth Valley Railway and the Vintage Carriages Trust, we learned some quite hard lessons for those of us who thought we'd set up perfection. Because of the pandemic, our small shop was no longer suitable. Our small cafe was no longer suitable. And we needed space for the people we needed safe space, widely spread space for the people who were coming in to catch the trains. This is when we were just beginning to get going again. So we had to revise how we'd done things. So we closed the small shop and opened a much larger shop in our exhibition shed, which did much better than the small shop had. We opened a much larger, well-spread, just a coffee cafe, nothing special, in the same shed, and it did very good business. And we spread our locomotive exhibits out, and we forced people down a route where they had to pass the exhibits and read the explanations. And I think we did a better job of telling people what we were all about, rather than when we just let them gallop straight towards the train. So yeah, we learned quite a bit, I think. Whether we'll retain the memory, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting, Chris. We did a bit the same at the Acton Depot, which is a big store, which we have public open days for, but we opened it for summer holidays because it was big, airy space that was quite safe and well ventilated. And we had to provide a sequence through that. So, and people actually rather liked the sequence because they found that they weren't missing anything. So, and they were doing it because they were doing it sequentially, they got lots of attention from staff and volunteers who were invigilating it, and we could deal with them kind of one at a time rather than as a great crowd. And I think that will give us some benefits too. And Chris, will you stick with these arrangements? Have you learnt this lesson forever now, do you think?
Oh, we're still learning, and we have to see what happens next. We've a fully booked Christmas based on what we did last Christmas, and we've got our fingers crossed that will happen. From the vintage coach point of view, we suddenly found our elderly compartment coaches pushed into service because they could contain bubbles. And we may continue to do a bit of that. I think we're going to be driven by the comfort level of visitors. And we have a very wide spread between those who think it's all over and those who aren't going out yet. And I think we've a lot still to learn about which way we're going in 2022. At the moment, because we're on staycation, we've been fiercely busy. In fact, one of the problems with our museum service is that they've wanted to be helpful and to talk about things and discuss where we go next and so on. And my chairman has been saying, well, that's very kind, but I'm a bit busy. You know, we've got a lot to do just to cope with heavy levels of work. And for if you want to buy a railway book, we have had donations of books which we will be selling, which have reached a level of near embarrassment. But this is all kindly meant. It will all be in good Yorkshireman. It will be turned into money. So we're very happy about it, but it is a different world.
Yeah, which we have to feel our way forwards, kind of step by step a bit. Our friends have had more donations of books for resale than they've ever had in their lives before, and had to have a special bargain sale to get rid of the stock, actually. A question from Utrecht.
Yes, Sam, I was thinking about what you said about having the opportunity also to make some changes, and I think that was happened during the Corona times, because it was very sad that our museum was closed, of course, but also we had to ask ourselves a very fundamental question, like, what do we want to keep? What is our core collection? So for us, actually, it was sort of in the end a blessing, because we could do the whole valuation process. And normally only on Mondays, our museum is closed and we can go into the depot and move stuff and look at it. So that was of course, it was not good, but in the end, it was sort of, we could use that time and space to work as a team and to get all heads together, and for 3 months, we did only this. So no exhibitions, no other plannings, we only did the valuation process. So I think that helped us to get through this process quite fast.
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting. Anja.
Well, yeah, I can also agree with what the colleague from Utrecht said, and I would like to add on behalf of Frank, who's no longer joining, that I think that our concept for deaccessioning and a collection would have not been finished so early without Corona, because due to Corona, our two collection centers in Frankfurt and in Berlin get used to work together on the digital basis, where they otherwise would have met in person, traveling from Berlin to Frankfurt and so on, finding dates that are fitting, and so work was much more easier, and they really could concentrate on discussing the questions that you have just mentioned. So in every situation, there's always a chance or something good. So for our collection work, I guess would say that was really a very fruitful time.
Yeah, I've heard that comment from many other museums too. Of course, it is a joke in museums, isn't it, that we'd all get far more work done if the public didn't keep getting in the way. But it's a joke we only have amongst ourselves, because we know that the public pay our wages ultimately. But you're right, Anja. And my understanding is that Zoom has been available since 1999 as a piece of software, and none of us had heard of it until 18 months ago. And suddenly we're all kind of proficient at it and using it in all kinds of ways for which it wasn't really designed. So we've all had to kind of learn pretty quickly. And I guess there are some things for which Zoom works better. Arguably, my leadership team think that I like Zoom because I can just turn them off whenever they disagree with me. But that isn't, of course, the case. But so we will undoubtedly hang on to some of these practices, and I think IATM has been able to be effective because we've just had to change very fast in the last 18 months. any other reflections on what you've learnt, what you might take with you? Kimmo?
Yes, talking about these digital platforms, I think there are advantages, but of course there are several problems. I mean, we were really lacking this kind of creative moments over a cup of coffee, meeting people, having these unofficial chats over a coffee or maybe a glass of wine. I mean, it was really so somehow changing the perceptions of how we work. Of course, we have to make rules how to deal with Teams and Zooms and meetings, and little by little people get tired of these meetings, and they turned off the cameras, and then there is this lack of personal interaction, and I think that was not an excellent thing, and I think there is still a challenge in this kind of a new hybrid models of working, how we deal with these problems and how we are able to recreate these creative moments within our organizations. Another thing I would like to add, the lessons learned. In Finland, especially, we faced the kind of a huge rise of domestic tourism during the summer times, and it was really unexpected, and we were probably not really prepared to this in July, where you have huge numbers of visitors in our museum, local visitors and people from Helsinki area, and it was actually a strange phenomenon in Finland that these provinces outside capital area, they were flourishing, but the museums in Helsinki, they were suffering. I mean, it was really this kind of we had something offer within this kind of concept of domestic tourism, to traveling somewhere else from capital area and enjoying the museums as well. And of course, the third thing I would like to add, that of course we also were focusing on this kind of new agile, resilient models of doing things differently, and really heavy focusing on digital issues and trying to develop different kind of low-level in-house digital solutions, and which was really a step forward in our organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all kind of probably done 5 years worth of digital work in 5 months, as we've tried to catch up, and we've also found that some of our digital programs are being consumed round the globe rather than just in London or the UK. So with our virtual tours of hidden London, disused tube stations, we find we have people watching from, well, English-speaking countries like America and Australia, but also kind of randomly in many other places around the world. And we always, one always suspects that London ought to have an international audience, but we've never gone out and really sought it. And so it's just cropped up by being digital, which is quite an interesting realization. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Oh, Stephen, good to see you.
Hello. One of the things in thinking about this and taking a look at some of the advantages and disadvantages, certainly increasing the broadband by having a digital awareness and a digital presence has been great. However, there's a lot of white noise out there, and it's very difficult to continue to market the museums to the public. Those that are museum people will pick up on it to a certain extent, but there's a growing kind of I would say they're getting tired of the digital, and the allure of the museum is definitely the artifacts. It's the real experience. It's coming to the museum, and to that end, in any business model, membership, donors, and in fact volunteers will need to have that physical presence. So in slingshotting out of this current pandemic, it's going to be very important to be able to offer that again, and to think much more of the public. I know that we were beginning to lose membership in a great way, because there were a lot more things that our members could then sign up for digitally. So we could no longer offer them the special evenings or behind the scenes rentals. Rentals were going down. So the business models have suffered greatly, and it's very difficult to monetize the online. So I think in terms of the future, it's really trying to re-engage the public in a safe way with our presence physically, and also to really get out there and garner more membership so that they can support, which would lead to more donors, and again supporting our business models as museums.
Yeah, and I think probably we need to remember that hybrid means that experience leads to digital engagement, and digital engagement leads to experience. It's that we need to be turning that kind of circle all the time, rather than saying, well, this is a digital program, or this is an experience-based one. And yeah, we've also seen that through our virtual tours started to fall off in the summer, because people don't want to be sat in front of a screen when the sun's shining and they can go out. But my goodness, they've come back with a vengeance as it gets darker in the autumn, which is good to see. So that will be very much a program where digital leads to physical ticket sales, and ticket sales lead to more engagement online. So I think kind of playing around those relationships will be the place to be. But at least we have that digital kind of competence and capacity, which we didn't have before. And our next new post in the museum, it's the first new role we've created since COVID, is basically a videographer to help us play those tunes between digital and experience. And that sort of short form video, I think, will be increasingly important in our own output, in our social media promotion, and everything we do. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to chip into this? What have you learned in the last 18 months? Anything we haven't covered up to now? Peter.
Certainly, our experience with FedEx, the European Museum Railways body, is that almost certainly, I think our future conferences and events are going to be hybrid events. While, like IATM, I mean, frankly, FedEx conferences were a direct copy, not surprisingly, from IATM, because I was the original organizer, and had a similar combination pattern of business and visits. Nevertheless, some people have always felt excluded, particularly if for financial reasons they couldn't travel for the business sessions. We were forced online by the pandemic, but I think we will try to, I think it's likely that FedEx Rail will stay in a hybrid format, at least for its business sessions, so that the exclusion, the financial exclusion factor won't apply. Also, I would congratulate IATM on the webinar series, and delighted that you're restarting it. And because I think it's raised IATM's profile and visibility considerably.
Great, thank you for that. Good to hear. Well done, Peter. Thank you. Well, I'm wondering if there's nothing else that anyone wants to contribute. Maybe I should just let's wrap up this session before everybody disappears. Thank you for joining us today. It's been something of an experiment for us, and we've learned a lot about it as we've gone. Thank you particularly to my colleague Emma for keeping us on the straight and narrow in digital sense of the word. We've clearly IATM needs to respond to some of the challenges of the new world. It's really interesting to hear how you've been managing that, and we will try and reflect that pretty in our program into the future. I think we'll probably stick with digital for the first 6 months of next year, unless things change rather surprisingly. And I guess one thing we've learned about everything to do with the pandemic is that it's the whole kind of issue of recovery has taken far longer than we ever thought it would, or our politicians told us it would. So it was all going to be over by Christmas, as I remember it, in 2020. But actually, it took, here we are facing the second Christmas with caseload in the UK as high as it's ever been. Although, fortunately, hospitalisation is at a much lower level now. So we want to get a bit more active on our website and on our Facebook strand. So please make sure you link your material and your individual organizations into what we're doing as well. Share it onto our site. We're going to populate it with webinars and more meetings like this in the near future. And your new board that you've elected today, and I can confirm that we have enough voting forms to have a quorum for those decisions that we came to in the General Assembly, which is a great relief. Thank you for your support. We'll carry those ideas into our next board meeting, which is before Christmas, and we'll come up with a program for the first 6 months of next year. You should continue to use the network personally and for your organizations as much as you possibly can. Always pleased to receive kind of queries from you about particular areas of work. We had 2 colleagues from the Verkehrshaus in Lucerne last week who are here for travel trade conferencing and discussions for the travel trade in 2022 and 2023, which was good and felt optimistic, and they really wanted to talk to us about Hidden London tours and other aspects of our work. We're always keen to share good practice. And I guess the thing that kept me personally going during the last 18 months was brilliant kind of access to the network of other museum chief executives, other museums, finding out what they were doing, because it's nothing worse than feeling that you're in a really dark place and nobody else is. It's really comforting to know that everybody is in the same dark place, and that some people have got some really interesting solutions and approaches. So I found that a huge comfort, not least from sessions like this with the IATM board and webinars. So let's look forward to a real conference in Prague in August, 28th of August onwards. We'll do some serious work on making that a really engaging conference. I guess we might have to think about it being hybrid in the way that Peter was just describing. And if you've got particular thoughts or ideas, do talk to your board members or to me, and we'll be happy to incorporate them. And we will be surveying you at some point about really what you want from the organization going into the sort of more medium-term future. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much to our speakers. We've done a lot of work on preparing those videos and so forth beforehand. It's all good learning, of course, having to do this stuff, because it's going to become part of, normal part of our existence, I suspect, anyway, in that hybrid model we were talking about. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon for me, or the evening for some of you, and we'll see you again perhaps on the 28th for a look behind the scenes at the Prague Postal Museum. And I do urge you to join us for some Christmas fun on the 7th of November, which will be live from the shop. We'll have music, we'll have fashion items being modeled for you in the museum shop by various members of staff, not me. And we'll also be making some visits, we hope, to Christmas fair in Frankfurt, to possibly doing something in Tampere, Kimmo. We thought we might have a go at that, and with a visit to the Christmas shop in Lucerne as well. So a bit more light-hearted, a bit more of a kind of Christmas party feel. and we'll have to dress one of the board members up as Santa Claus for the day, I think, and I'll be looking for volunteers. Actually, that beard of yours, Stephen, looks kind of just perfect for the role. So thank you all very much. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Yep. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.